In 20 years of portrait painting, I made plenty of mistakes that slowed my progress. But if I could go back, there's one thing above all else I'd do differently. So in this video, I'm going to share the single most important lesson I wish I'd known sooner so you can avoid my biggest mistake and save years of frustration. Have you ever poured your heart into something only to repeatedly fail? That was me, year after year. One of my greatest ambitions has always been to have my work accepted into the UK's most prestigious portrait competition at the National Portrait Gallery in London. I entered every year since 2008, but each time my work was rejected. It was incredibly disappointing. I'd worked hard for years trying to achieve a painterly style with bold brushstrokes like the artists I admired. I went on their courses, watched their demos and bought all their special brushes. But no matter how skilled I became, I still wasn't getting in. Then, in 2024, after 16 years of rejection, my painting Self-Portrait at Low Tide finally got accepted. So what changed? The truth is, up until then, something vital had been missing. I'd been making the same mistake I now see many portrait painters making. I was too obsessed with technique. The problem is, in most portrait classes, the model has already been set up for us. So we focus all our attention on how to paint, making it look real, without asking ourselves what we're painting and why it matters. For realist painters, how you paint is certainly important, but your viewers, your customers and the judges in competitions will notice your subject matter, what you choose to paint, long before they pay any attention to your fancy brushwork. This was the difference with Self-Portrait at Low Tide. It wasn't just technically good, there's something else that makes it really interesting. It tells a compelling story. But to tell a story, there's another element even more fundamental that a painting must have: a strong composition. If only I'd understood this sooner, I could have achieved much more success earlier in my career. The good news is, you don't have to wait years like me to develop this essential skill. You can start creating meaningful paintings your viewers will engage with right now. Until I learned about composition, all my paintings sucked. It's without doubt the single most important thing we need to think about when creating a work of art. But when we're learning to paint portraits, we're so concerned with the difficult task of making our paintings look like our subjects, composition is often an afterthought. I'm certainly guilty of this, as most of my videos are about the other fundamental rules of painting from life: drawing in proportion, light and dark, and colour. However, composition is even more essential because it doesn't just matter for realist painting, it applies to all forms of visual art. If you consider what an image really is, whether it's a painting, an advert with text, or a camera shot from a movie, it's a series of shapes, lines, colours, and other visual elements on a flat surface. How we integrate these visual elements so that they work together as a whole is the foundation or framework upon which the whole image is built. The term composition actually comes from music. So if your composition doesn't work, it's like playing out of tune. The whole thing feels off key. The possibilities for arranging shapes and colours are infinite. So over the centuries, artists have thought long and hard about it and have come up with loads of complicated theories. But it really doesn't have to be that way. Composition is just another skill, and it's actually much easier to learn than painting portraits. The main thing is, you start practicing this skill as soon as possible. Don't wait years like I did. So how can you practice composition? Fortunately, there's a really simple exercise even complete beginners can do to master composition and develop their sense of colour and design: painting still lives. But still lives are boring, right? I know, I thought so too. So I stuck to painting portraits, and I missed out on the most valuable lesson I needed to become a better artist. Looking back, if I could change just one thing, I'd have spent much more time painting still lives. I did paint a few, but I just treated them as studies. I'd grab a few objects and start painting them, skipping the most powerful part of the exercise. If composition is the most important quality in a painting, then setting up your subject is the most important stage. By spending the necessary time thinking about what you're going to paint before you start. You're not just painting studies, you're learning how to create complete works of art. So what are the key things you need to think about when setting up your subject? If you're ever stuck looking for something to paint, one of the best places to find inspiration is in your local grocery store. I'll start by selecting an object that I find interesting, like this wonderful bright red pomegranate. Next, I'll look for more objects that work well with it. This green apple, for example, is complementary to red, the opposite colour on the colour wheel. So together they create a complementary colour harmony. These colours look good, but they're both very bold, and the objects are similar in size. So I'm going to swap the apple for a much smaller fig. The fig's more muted purple is right next to red on the colour wheel. This is called an adjacent, or more technically, analogous colour harmony. There aren't any strict rules saying you must use complementary or adjacent colour schemes, or how many colours you can have. You can use as many as you like, as long as they work in harmony with each other. The words harmony and composition literally mean bringing things together. We bring musical notes together to create harmony, or compose words to tell a story. But there's an even more powerful tool than colour for bringing your whole image together: light and dark. Here, I've placed a shadow box over my subject to create more contrast. There's probably no more effective way to group separate objects together than unifying them into either lights or shadows. The pattern of light and dark is another essential component you can use when designing a composition. I'll usually do a number of small quick pencil sketches using just 3 tones, the lights, shadows and midtones, and I'll try several different abstract designs to see which one works best. The next integral component of composition might just be the most challenging, but it may be even more important than light and dark or colour, because it's the very first thing that will draw your viewer's attention. I'm talking about the main centres of interest: small details, notes of bright colour, and hard edges found in areas of high contrast. These can be arranged into underlying shapes or lines that will lead the viewer around the painting. In my setup, the centres of interest form a simple triangle, one of the most common arrangements you'll see in still life compositions. It's really important that your centres of interest don't compete with each other. The more details there are, the more you'll have to think about. A common mistake beginners make is choosing subjects that are way too complicated. You'll learn a lot faster if you start with simple subjects that are easier to arrange and understand. Before you start painting, there's one more crucial decision that will shape your entire composition: the dimensions of your canvas. Because this is a video, my canvas has the same 16:9 aspect ratio as the screen, but you can crop your canvas any number of ways, landscape or portrait, depending on your viewpoint. Your objects don't all need to be contained within the canvas, so don't be afraid to crop them. This can create dynamic tension and lead the viewer's eye into the painting. Think carefully about the negative spaces, the empty spaces around your objects, and the distances between your objects and the edges of the canvas. Make sure none of these spaces or distances are the same. In fact, a really good rule is to make sure that no two shapes in your painting are the same size. With all the different visual elements you've got to think about, composition can feel like an immense subject. That's why artists have come up with countless theoretical rules and mathematical principles to try and make composition easier. Following these rules might help, but really there are no shortcuts. The only way you will master composition is through lots and lots of practice. Remember, your subject is the most important thing in your painting, so make sure you spend enough time doing studies and experimenting before deciding what to paint. It's this process that holds the real key to mastering composition, far more than any theory. Composition is a superpower. It can take a mundane object we all take for granted, like fruit, and turn it into something beautiful and engaging. Large paintings with complicated subjects and lots of technical skill are amazing, but sometimes the most powerful works of art are the simplest. As I said before, the terms composition and harmony are borrowed from music. When a painting works on a purely visual level, when it's a really interesting arrangement of shapes and colours, so that it doesn't matter if it's a portrait, landscape or still life, that's when painting truly becomes like music. For me, that's one of the highest achievements in representational art, and it's an ideal we should all be striving for. One of the most effective ways to master this skill of arranging shapes and colours is by painting still lifes. You don't need to be a technical master or have loads of fancy brushes to start creating complete works of art. Of course, technique still matters, and still lifes can help you develop your own painterly style much faster too. If you want one of the best still life exercises for practicing expressive brushwork, watch this video next.